There we go. So we've started recording. So welcome everyone. I'm Susie Williams. I'm the Secretary of the North East CILIP Regional Members Network. For any of you who haven't come across this organisation before, CILIP is the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals and is a national body, Chartered Royal Institute throughout the whole country. And the regional member network is basically the area is like put into regions in the country, and we are the North East group, and we're very active and run lots of different events. I'm on that North East committee. My day job is as an academic liaison librarian at the University of Sunderland, and I'm calling in from Durham, which is where I live this evening. So we do have members of that North East committee here this evening. So we're a group of volunteers representing a wide range of roles and sectors within the North East, and we provide support and CPD opportunities for CILIP members in the North East. And also, because in COVID we switched everything online, what doing the webinars has enabled us to do, as is represented by our speakers today, is actually people from all over the country and indeed the world have joined in our webinars, which is fantastic, that no one is limited by geography. If you've got an internet connection, you're very welcome today. So it's been great to see you all introducing yourselves as you arrived. If you haven't had opportunity to do that, please do pop that in the chat. It's our very great pleasure to introduce and welcome today our speakers, who are John Vincent and Amie Golding as our speakers. And they will be sharing with us about pride in a school library and the importance of celebrating the contributions of LGBTQ plus people. The session will be quite practical and there'll be opportunities for reflection, questions and discussion. I know that Amie and John are very up for having these conversations. So it's quite an informal session. If you've got a question you think is daft, it is not daft. Please do ask any question. I will let Amie and John introduce themselves, but before I hand over to them, I'll just go through some brief housekeeping arrangements, just so you can make the most of your time with us this evening. So on a practical point of view, the Teams platform we're using this evening, some of you may be familiar with it. You may use it every day. Some of you, this may be your first foray into using Teams. So I'll just highlight a few features. There is a little floating toolbar, depending on the device you're using. It might be at the top or the bottom or at the side. There is a mic button. So if you're not speaking, if you can make sure that's just turned off, because it reduces any kind of background interference. But when we get to questions, if you would like to ask a question verbally rather than the chat, please do unmute yourself when prompted. If you're on a small screen, you might not see all of the options, but if you click on the three little dots, that will give you all the options available. There is a hands up if you want to ask a question verbally. You can choose to be on the webinar, not on the webinar, on the webcam or not. If you've got poor internet connection, you might want to turn that webcam off, just because that can reduce any kind of stuttering. But it's up to you how you wish to engage in the session. John and Amie will be welcoming contributions during the talk, so feel free at any point you've got a question, just pop it in the chat. My colleague Jenny is managing our chat, so she'll keep an eye on any questions you might have. Just to help with the quality of your sound and video, we recommend that you refrain from using any other programs on your computer, just because that might just slow things down. I know it sometimes does on mine. In terms of when we'll take questions, there'll be an opportunity after Amie's spoken for anything immediately about her talk you may have. And then there'll be another Q&A session near the end where you can ask either John or Amie any questions that you have, either about what they've talked about today or just something else that might have occurred to you. So Jenny is managing the chat. So if you have any technical issues or any questions about the webinar, just pop them in the chat and Jenny will see those. Leanne, our digital champion on our committee, is also here and she'll be live tweeting. So if you'd also like to tweet either now or after the event, the hashtag is CILIPNE. So we'd love to see you engage on our Twitter feed as well. We will be circulating the slides, just a few slides today, but we'll circulate those after the event. So if you want to reflect on the content or look back at anything, you'll have plenty of times to do that. And we thank you for coming this evening, because it's fine having speakers, but if we have no participants, then we don't have an event. So thank you for giving your time. We will finish promptly by 7, as we know you may have meals to eat, dogs to walk, gardens to water. Certainly mine will need watering after today, other commitments. So we won't go beyond 7 o'clock. The recording will be made available later to you, and we'll share it with you as participants, and then at a later stage we'll share it more widely. So we'd ask if you just keep that recording amongst yourselves at the moment. That's kind of a benefit of coming to the webinar today. So that's over to me. I don't have to do any fire announcements because we're not in person. So I will hand over to John and Amie.
Great, thank you very much. What I thought I'll do a very, very quick introduction and also do the note on language, and then I'll hand over to Amie for her presentation. So thank you very much for inviting me back. I've been here before. I'm John Vincent. For those of you that I haven't met before, I coordinate a network of libraries, archives, museums and galleries that work around social justice. One of the main areas I'm kind of championing and I'm interested in is LGBTQ plus issues. I've been working in libraries. Sorry, I have to say this because it's a big year. I started working in libraries in 1962. So this is a big year for me. So I was only 4 when I started. And so I'm really happy to be here, to be talking to all of you. I can pick up questions later on. I wanted just to start with language. The usual abbreviation we refer to ourselves is LGBTQ plus. I won't spend time going into what the letters mean, but we can pick that up in the chat if anyone's interested. Many of us now prefer to call ourselves queer, and I do. When I was at school, I was quite badly bullied. And one of the terms that, it was mainly boys at school called me was queer, amongst other things. And for a long time, I wouldn't use it. Now I do, because I think, A, I'm reclaiming something and it makes me feel stronger. And B, I think queer is a good definition because it gets beyond the individual LGBT bits and begins to look at something broader. And I'll come back to that if you're interested when we get to the questions bit. So thank you. Sorry, that's enough of an introduction. We're starting a whole new double act here. So I'm really happy to hand over to Amie, and I'm looking forward to hearing her talk. Amie, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, John. So my name is Amie Golding. I'm the school librarian at the Cathedral School in Llandaff in Cardiff, but I'm from Neath. I come in every day and I run the whole senior section library, so that's the secondary age. And I have a brilliant colleague who works in the primary section. And we have pupils here who identify as all kinds of things. So it's so important that we are representative and inclusive of those pupils so that they feel that they've got a safe space to be. The reason I'm speaking today is that I put myself forward when I saw the call for speakers for CILIP North East's Pride talk. And I'd spent the last 2 years here trying to make my library more inclusive and representative, particularly with LGBTQ plus representation. And I thought maybe I could possibly talk about what I've done here and how we've tried to reinvent the library here. So on my next slide, I've got some photos of my first year in CSL. There we are. So I started in September 2020 and it was peak pandemic. My shelves were covered in cellophane, as you can see there. There were so many books here as well. They were double stacked. It was really a place in need of some TLC and some love and affection. I think it had unintentionally sort of fallen into a bit of disrepair and just needed someone to sort of pick it up and go, no, let's make this something really, really cool and really good. And one of the first things I did was in October, it was Black History Month. And I thought, well, let's do a display. It's natural. It's a school library. We should be displaying what we've got and highlighting issues. So I did a display for Black History Month, and it was a really good exercise because it allowed me to see exactly what was here in terms of Black representation, but also what was missing. So I could actually see, right, what are some areas that I need to update? Who are some authors that should be here? Some figures from history? What's not here that should be? And so I commenced a huge weeding project with a lot of donations going to the school's charity that year, which was the Salvation Army. We gave them lots and lots and lots of boxes of books, both fiction and non-fiction. And it was great. It was great to take off some of the stuff here that perhaps was a bit tired, needed a new home, and give them to a good cause. So that weeding project has been gone on for the last couple of years. It's still very much ongoing as and when I can, as I'm the sole worker here and then the senior library. But I did find when I carried that out, there was a distinct lack in particular, even less than sort of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic representation, even less LGBTQ+. So on my next slide, I've just got some photos just to go through what the kind of thing I've brought in, which has been lovely. But I'd say LGBTQ+ representation here was less than 1%. There was really nothing really particular here, and not enough that I could make a pride display like I've done now. And I don't think it was intentional. I think it just needed someone like myself who is aware of issues with representation, and I'm really passionate about representation. I feel like if you can see yourself in a space like a library, then the benefits of that are, I think personally, enormous, and I say that as a white woman. So the shelves here now have a vast array of fiction, so written by and about people who identify as LGBTQ+, who may be questioning their identity and orientation, and non-fiction titles as well about LGBTQ+ history, true stories, accounts, manifestos by and of those within the community. And some of those titles are part of my sort of shelf help, health and wellbeing section that I've got at the top of the room here. So there's books there about what to do if you are questioning your identity, if you're not quite sure, perhaps you have come out as LGBTQ+, and how to deal with that. So it's been really important because I know there have been cases here of pupils who have been questioning their identity, and it's important that they feel, perhaps if they can't tell someone, if they can find solace in a book, any kind of title, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, if they can see themselves, I just think that makes a huge difference, and they feel seen. I think that's so important. So the health and wellbeing section has support on growing up, coming out, having pride, mental and physical health as well. And I definitely have collections of recommended titles here. That'll be if they will be of any interest to anyone. And some of the photos here, some of the titles behind me. I've still got a lot of work to do here in the library, but the most important aspect has been representation. And this goes for everything: Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, LGBTQ+, neurodiversity, people who may be displaced or have refugee status. That was particularly key in our project to become a school of sanctuary. And I find sanctuary a key word too. My library it's very flattering, but it has been called a sanctuary and a safe space by some of the people here. And that means the world. That's like the best thing I could ever hear as a school librarian. Both pupils and staff have used those words. And some pupils have actually designated this as a safe space for when they're having a tough time. And some of these have been pupils who have been sort of struggling with their identity and sort of questioning, not sure how they feel. I'm very proud to have played a part in helping them find their way. It has been a lot of work to try and bring the library up to date and make it relevant, but I think we're getting there. I think just having some kind of representation in June of Pride, I think, is a big step. But it's important as well that these items, and I talked about this with my colleague in the English department who does identify as gay. We didn't want these titles singled out in a section on their own. It's very important to us that they are part of the wider collection, that it's normal. it's where they belong. They belong alongside titles by straight authors or trans authors. They all belong together. They shouldn't be isolated in a single area, but it's fine to highlight them like this and throw a spotlight on them. I think it's about getting that balance right. In addition to that, I actually help out with our Diversity and Culture Representation Society within the school. They're called Direct. They set themselves up last year, and last year their focus was Black, Asian, minority, ethnic representation. This year it's been LGBTQ+. It's made up of and run by the pupils themselves, and they have 2 chairs in year 13, and they lead discussions and planning, and they're absolutely fantastic. They are brilliant. We arrange for them to have their meetings in here in the library, as it's somewhere they all feel comfortable and able to discuss things freely, and as well as that, they can access the resources here to support their ventures. If we go on to my next slide, there's some really lovely feedback that I've had, and I wanted to show this. The slides will be made available after this presentation as well. So if people do want to read these, because it can be quite small on Teams, and there's a lot of text there, and people had some really lovely things to say. But yes, you will be able to read these in your own time afterwards. Please do. I hope they help you. So the comments I've had here, they're so kind, and they by our direct chair in year 13, who is he identifies as gay. Our English teacher identifies as gay, but also our history teacher is Bangladeshi, and she had some really lovely things to say about being seen as what she described herself as brown. So to be able to see herself in the collection as well is brilliant too. And the other comments are from some of the pupils. It's just so important that we represent these kids. They have a voice as well. They're brilliant here. We have a drama studio here that's called, it was formerly called the Roald Dahl Studio, because we had a link to the author Roald Dahl, and the pupils decided they didn't like that because they found that he had some quite anti-Semitic views in his time, and because of that they wanted to change the title, which is, you know, absolutely within their right. If they feel that that's important to them, we should listen to them, they should be heard. And because of that, they were able to overturn it. And it's now just called the Drama Studio. We haven't sort of renamed it anything else as such, but they really made their voice heard, and that was really excellent. And as well as that, there was some artwork in here that was donated to the school and had been on display in here for a long time. And so in solidarity with them, I thought, well, they shouldn't be here either. If they've wanted to rename the Drama Studio, it's important that I ally myself with them and say, right, you know, this shouldn't be in here either. So I haven't taken the titles off the shelf, but I have removed that artwork displaying it. And a similar issue that we have had has been with the Harry Potter series. So I had a discussion with my year 12s and 13s last year about what they think is appropriate. And it's difficult because we need to provide for some of the younger pupils who do perhaps want to read those books. But I think the consensus that we came to, that we all agreed on, and it was important that I had this conversation with them and they were part of that conversation. The consensus we came to was that we would keep the books on the shelf, but we wouldn't promote them. We wouldn't put them out as a display, advertising them, promoting them, because of the views that the author has had that have been quite offensive to some of the pupils here. They're really not have been very happy with it. And with regards to replacing those titles as well, should they get lost or should they be damaged, we agreed that I would then purchase those titles from somewhere like a charity shop, or they would be secondhand. I would not buy any new copies from a publisher or a supplier that would then benefit that author's estate. So that was what we could agree on, and they were comfortable with that. But it's important that I check in with them and make sure that they're still happy with that arrangement. So they've been really brilliant at making their voices heard, and I think that's so important. This is a space for them as well as staff members. They come and work in here. They come in here after school when they're waiting for their parents to pick them up. They spend their breaks in here. It's important that they feel comfortable and represented. And I'm hoping that I've been able to do that fine by them, but they're great at telling me if they think that something could be better. And that is great, because how do you learn? You know, the best way to learn is through feedback and critique, and that way we can make things better for this community. I think it's just so important that they see themselves here. So yeah, that's so whistle stop tour through my library and what we've done here. But yeah, I know we've got, we're on the clock, so I'm going to hand back over to John. But I'd happily would take any questions if people have them as well. I'd more than happily answer them.
That was amazing, Amie. Your enthusiasm just exudes. I'm busy writing notes here. And I love it that you're speaking from your library space as well, because I feel like I'm kind of connected with, even though I'm many, many miles from Cardiff, I feel there's a kind of connection there, which is really great.
Thank you so much. No, I really wanted to do it from here, not only because of the hour drive home and I wanted to make sure I was on time, but I did want to show the things we have here and be in the space where I have sort of made these changes and be able to talk about the pupils. You know, they live and breathe this place. It's a long school day they have here, and I think especially for the pupils whose parents are staff members here, it can be almost a second home. So it's important that they feel welcome in here and they can come in and just go, oh, I'm all right. That's the most important thing to me.
Oh, brilliant. Jenny, are there any questions in the chat that are for Amie? Oh, you're still on mute.
Would you like to read your own question, Susie?
Yes, I can. I'm just trying to, yeah. So my question was, so you've talked about the stock that you've bought since you've come into the library, and I just wondered if you came into this role with knowledge about the particular subjects that you've talked about and the resources, or if you've kind of started your learning from scratch in this job, or by doing your own research. I'm really interested.
A bit of both, to be honest. I joined in September, and I was appointed school librarian. I did have an assistant, and she finished. She was due to finish anyway at October half term that year, and they decided not to replace her. They sort of said, "You can do it on your own," and I was like, "Okay." But I'm very passionate about LGBTQ plus representation anyway. I fully consider myself a fully fledged ally and do everything I can to support the community. I'm really passionate about it. But so I had a bit of knowledge, but there has been a lot of learning on the job here as well, and sort of trying and seeing what works, doing a lot of talking to people, doing a lot of research. But I think, yeah, like learning on the job has been very much a thing here, and it's been a bit of a pressure cooker, but it's just been great just to get those books on the shelves. And the kids are great as well. They will come in and say, "Miss, I really enjoyed this book. Have you heard of this author? Have you got this title by them?" And they will give me some brilliant recommendations. And so from that, I've sort of carved out little sort of websites that I use, for example, like things like Book Trust are brilliant. Even just things like book lists. My supplier does things like Book Talk books that have been popular, and a lot of them have sort of LGBTQ plus representation in them as well. So it's been a bit of both, definitely. I sort of came in with a sort of bit of knowledge and a lot of passion, and I've got a lot more knowledge now than when I started 2 years on, definitely.
That's really interesting, because a lot of what I hear from people is, "Oh, I didn't get that job because I didn't have the experience, or I didn't have the knowledge."
Yeah,
and I think
I was so shocked when I got this job.
And I think what you're demonstrating is actually you can learn on the job. And as you say, you're working as a solo librarian, and you didn't expect to be a solo person.
No, indeed.
And we do have quite a few solo librarians, even just on our committee, Jenny being one of them. And I think it just demonstrates that with enthusiasm and creativity, and I think talking with people is so important. And I think I'm just thinking, maybe when we move on to John speaking, if there are any of those websites that you found useful, if you could maybe pop some in the chat, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah.
That would be really, really good. And I think, Jenny, I think you've got a question as well.
Yeah, my other one, I was really pleased to hear about the intershelving the books together rather than having a separate queer section, because I can remember years and years and years ago feeling incredibly awkward stood in front of that display, which, yeah, that just doesn't work, does it?
No.
Do you tag or highlight the books in some way using a little discrete label, or do you tag them on the catalogue, or not at all?
I was going to say, yeah, on the catalogue, definitely. When I use Heritage Circa, and they've got the sort of quick cat module, which pulls a lot of information from the British Library, and I'll sort of try and add some tags there and say if they're sort of LGBTQ plus or if they're trans. So on the catalogue in particular, I haven't done it outwardly on the books themselves. The kids are pretty good. They'll come in and they sort of know already if there's characters in it who are part of the community, and they've told me, like, even things like I think it's one of the Rick Riordan books. I don't know if it's Percy Jackson, but they were like, "Oh yeah, there's a character in that who was gay." And I was like, "Is there?" I didn't even know. So they are brilliant at letting me know where there is proper representation in books that you wouldn't expect. Like, so like the Adam Silveris, for example, like they both die at the end. I think people who've read that know that it's a love story between two boys. But sort of the more mainstream, I guess, fiction, like Percy Jackson and Karen and McManus, One of Us is Lying. Obviously, Cooper has feelings of being queer in that as well. So that they're really good for that, and I do try and tag them where I can on the catalogue. haven't considered doing it on the books themselves, but it would be something that I would look into if the people in the school who are part of the community thought that was a good thing. I would certainly look into that and see if it was something that was feasible, definitely.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Amie. I think we will move on to John's part. And if anyone's got any questions that suddenly when John starts speaking, you think, oh no, I forgot to ask Amie that, please do pop them in the chat and Jenny will keep an eye on that. So over to you, John.
Great, thank you very much. That was brilliant, Amie. Thank you. And it's a nice kind of lead into what I want to cover. So this is broadly what I'm going to cover, but I'm going to talk as obviously sort of more broadly. I popped in the chat. I'm so envious. I wish I was a teenager at your school, Amie. When I was at school, admittedly a long time ago. So I was at secondary school between 1959 and 1966. But there was nothing. I knew then, or I suspected then, that I was queer, but I didn't know, and there was nothing that I could see that would help. I also didn't perceive how I came across to other students, and so, as I mentioned earlier on, I was really badly bullied. And the idea of school libraries as a place of sanctuary actually rings a real strong bell with me. He never said a word, but my school librarian, school teacher librarian, Bill Woodgate, actually obviously recognised how badly I was being bullied and offered me a lunchtime job, in inverted commas, in the school library. And it was just somewhere where I could be and I could do things without being in the playground or in the cafeteria or anywhere where I was being targeted. And the library became somewhere where I did feel safe. And it's so good to see that continuing and to see the kind of representation that you're bringing for all of us in the library. So okay, we're going to be, I'm going to try and be celebratory and upbeat, which is really what I want to do for my session, but I have to start on a downbeat note and then we'll go up from there. So personally, and you don't have to agree with me, but personally, I think we're living at a dangerous time. So we've got immense developments, we've got immense growth in representation, we've got our LGBTQ plus people's voices being heard more and more. But as somebody once said to me, all these gains are fragile and it wouldn't take a lot to start pulling them back. If we think about Roe versus Wade in the States, for example, the fact that women's rights are suddenly being rolled back. We look at what's happening in Russia in terms of queer people. There are so many examples of things where it's starting to go wrong. So, and this is a personal note, you don't have to agree with me. I don't go with this thing about libraries being neutral. I think libraries have a very strong voice, and I think one of the things that we need to be showing really, really powerfully is how safe it is and how representative it is. Can't say it now. Representative it is in our libraries for queer users and queer staff. We often focus on our library users, which is absolutely right. But our colleagues often get left out of the picture. And it's something about making sure that they also are represented. We work with people all the time. Some of them may be struggling. There may be something going on at home that they don't want to talk about, but it's really vital that they feel safe to be able to if they want to. So it's something around making our libraries safe for everybody. And we all have a role in that. As many of you will know, part of my job is doing training, both online and face-to-face. And I do a lot of training with what I'd call front of house staff. And you get library staff saying, we don't manage our libraries, what can we do? It's something that we can all do to make our libraries safe. We need to be looking at and being very aware of aggression, microaggressions, things being said, people being treated in different ways, hostility. Some of it may be quite open. So I worked for a while in a library a very long time ago, thank goodness, and it's changed now, I hope, but where the library manager thought that libraries were about freedom of speech. And so in this library, in a particular library, there was a group of particularly awful older white men who used to sit near the entrance and make comments on everybody who passed by, often sexist, often homophobic comments. And the manager thought that this was fine because that was a part of free speech. But luckily, a group of library staff didn't think that, and we challenged it, and things moved on. And it's something around, we may have older, and it's not just older because I'm older, but it's not about age, it's about people's views. So maybe older, maybe younger, but we have people who are hostile to LGBTQ plus issues, and we need to make sure that our libraries are safe. We need to deal with problems. So rather than letting things drift, we need to challenge people. We need to look at the kinds of issues that there might be in our libraries. We need to ensure that everybody feels welcome, safe and comfortable. And part of that is looking at the kinds of images that we might represent. It's frankly too easy to say, there aren't any, we don't get them through our library suppliers. So there's lots and lots of ways that we can begin to peel that back, to begin to look at the kind of images we show. Are the posters that we have representative? Are the local queer groups with publicity material, for example, represented on notice boards in libraries? Do we make everybody welcome? Amie touched on the word sanctuary, and I've picked up on that as well. In part of my other work, as some of you again will know, I work with libraries of sanctuary, looking at how we can make new arrivals to libraries to the UK welcome. And a big part of that is making new arrivals who arrive here who are queer also welcome in their library spaces. There are some heartbreaking descriptions of the sorts of struggles that queer LGBTQ plus people will have had in their own countries to get here. The fact that when they get here, they're not believed. The Home Office, for example, often says they don't believe somebody looks lesbian or gay or whatever it is. So part of our representation and part of our support is making sure that all our staff are aware of those issues and know what things are going on and what we can do to make the library a positive, welcoming place. I have a kind of, it's not really a hobby horse, but it's a kind of thing I'm really hot on. I just feel that quite a lot of library people I've spoken to take this whole idea of neutrality so far that they don't really engage with the news and things that are going on around them. And I just feel that as people working with communities, and it might be a community in a public library, a school library, a college library, a university library, whatever kind of library it is, we need to know the background to what's going on. And I'll give you just a tiny example. So I saw a newsletter that I read every week and I value highly generally, but this week it repeated a news item from the Telegraph, which in inverted commas and in brackets as an aside might make one think to start with, close my brackets, a piece from the Telegraph quoting where the author and writer Julie Bindel had been disinvited, I think was the term it used, from a library in Nottingham because of her strong anti-trans views. And the Telegraph article, probably not surprisingly, had said how disgraceful this was, and it was cancel culture, it was all that kind of stuff. The article was picked up by this newsletter in quite a neutral, oh dear, this is awful kind of way, without I think going into the background about who Julie Bindell is, the fact that she's got a long history of anti-trans views, and that we need to be very wary of just falling into a trap that, you know, libraries don't censor, so we don't do that sort of thing, without exploring more of the background about how damaging a lot of the work that she does is, for example. Sorry, I'll get off my hobby horse, but I just think it's something where we need to be really, really closely aware of the political with a small p background to a lot of the issues that we look at, and making sure that we talk to people. Amy's said that really well. She talks to her library users, they certainly talk to her, and it's something about making sure that we do that we talk to people, we talk to our colleagues, we make contact with people locally in our communities and talk to them. So going back to the issue about whether we shelve books separately or interfile them, personally, I like the interfiling, but bringing them out for special occasions. But it might be that the local community actually feels it's at a stage where it needs more than that right now, because they're under siege, for example. So they feel that they'd like a separate collection. And it's something where we can learn by talking to local people about how we deal with those sorts of issues. We're also at a big moment, I think, where particularly if you look at what's happening in the States, there are all sorts of complaints. So, you know, the top, I don't know how many it is now, maybe 10 or more, complained about books in libraries in the States are LGBTQ plus titles, and there's a real backlash against making that sort of representation, and it's allied to the backlash against, for example, drag queen story time. I don't know whether you picked up again on the news, but very recently the Proud Boys group in the States actually burst in upon a drag queen story time and disrupted it completely in a really frightening way. We haven't got to that here yet, but it's something where we need to be aware that things we do may bring on those sorts of issues, and we need to be ready for them and decide how we're going to deal with them. I'm going to pass on to my other slide in a moment and then leave it open, because I really wanted us to talk rather than me just going on, because I could just go on. So what I want to do, I want to just talk about celebration and commemoration for a moment. So we all know these, I'm sure, but it's just a memory jogger. So we've got LGBTQ plus History Month in February, which has become a growing celebration across libraries, archives, museums, galleries, more and more and more happening, and it's, you know, terrific when you look how it's taken off. We've got Pride, which is happening. June is traditionally seen as Pride Month, but if you look across the country, there are Prides nearly every weekend. So I'm just showing off. I've looked up Newcastle. So Newcastle's Pride is 22nd to 24th of July. Here in Exeter, our Pride is in March. There will be something going on that you can link to and ally with, throughout the year. I also think it's important that and I think it's more commemorate than celebrate, Idaho or Ida Hobbit, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, which is the 17th of May each year. That is much more of a bit like Holocaust Memorial Day. It's a day that we mark to remember the kind of impact that homophobia, biphobia, transphobia have had on people's lives. And it's again, libraries are doing more and more to commemorate that day. And then finally, and again, Amie touched on this, I think it's really important that all our other events also have a queer content, rather than rather than having this thing where everything is in a sort of neat box. So we have Black History Month in October, for example, and that reflects Black and minority ethnic material and so on. I think it's great if we could also put some queer material in there and some disability material in there, so we mix up the months. So we might still feature LGBTQ plus History Month or Black History Month or Disability History Month, but we also make sure that the material that we show and the things that we do and the events we have reflect across that intersectional quality that we have, so that we actually begin to look at everything. Young people, older people, everybody, I suppose, I don't think now see themselves in these neat sort of binary boxes. And I think the more that we can get out of those boxes too and reflect the true nature of who people are and the kind of mix that we all are, the better. And on that really hopeful, positive note, I'm going to hand back to Susie and hopefully hand over to some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very
there we
much.
are. Sorry, there we are. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got contact details for both John and Amie if you wanted to follow up on any of things that they've either said, either because you want to have a longer conversation, then we might have the opportunity today. And by the heavy noddings on the screen, I think both will be up for that if you wanted to follow something up. Or if there's maybe a very sensitive question that you want to ask that you feel a bit awkward asking in a public webinar context that you want to ask. And I think on the back of that, I think I might ask a question that I've just posted into the chat, that if there's someone here this evening who would like to start exploring the themes that you've both been talking about, but it's quite new, so they've come along this evening to find out a bit more, but are a bit apprehensive or maybe not very confident about doing that, whether it's talking with colleagues about the issues, and maybe not knowing if any of their colleagues are gay or lesbian, queer, or whether talking with their library users. I know that covers quite a broad area because I wanted to give you the option of kind of how you apply. Do you have any kind of hints and tips how someone gets started engaging in the conversations? Because I think sometimes that's the most challenging thing. You know, John's got 50 years plus of experience of thinking, well, what does this mean for me and what can I say to others? For some people, tonight might be the first time they're kind of going, okay, I want to learn more, but I have no idea where to start with this.
Yeah, do you want to start, Amie, or shall I start?
Don't mind at all. I don't mind at all, whichever you prefer.
Go on then.
Okay,
you
cool.
go first.
I think the main thing for me was getting to grips with my collection here, what is actually here on the shelves, and that was such a good exercise that I did with Black History Month. So if you are a sort of sole librarian or a small team, that can be quite a good place to start, is finding out what is actually here on the shelves, what can I see, do I recognize any authors who I maybe know or maybe don't know are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I think in terms of speaking to colleagues or users, I know with asking sort of like with people's pronouns, they're generally quite happy to sort of say. Some of my people here perhaps have decided that they identify as non-binary, and I sort of said to them, what are your pronouns? What should I be using for you? And they go, oh, you can use a mix, or they may say, oh, these are my pronouns. This is what I prefer. Generally, they're really accepting of that, and it's nice to sort of ask and get it right and assume and get it wrong. I think that would be a no-no for me, is just assuming. And if they have decided to change their name, which a couple of people here have done, they've decided they want to go by a different name to match up with their identity and their orientation, use that name and use it with colleagues as well. Don't sort of just call them to their face, say, oh, this name and that the other name to your colleagues. Use it consistently is what I would say. Just use it across the board, and maybe even correct. If you feel brave enough to sort of correct if someone's getting it wrong, you could be like, do you mean so and so, and say that name that they've chosen. I think because even if they're not getting the support at home, which more often than not they are, but they might not be, and them, mum and dad, or dad and dad, mum and mum, they might not know that they've decided to change their name and change their identity. At least if we can do that for them in school, then they know that they are going to be accepted elsewhere, and it's a good start. They can try it here. They can see if they really do feel that way. That will be some starting points for me personally, and it's what I found here that works quite well.
Okay, I do. That's brilliant. I'll kind of follow on just really quickly on two levels. On a personal level, I can, and yeah, I'm talking about a different time altogether. So it's almost like prehistory here. But so like I remember the struggle about trying to come to grips with who I was. And then once I'd come to grips with who I was, starting to tell other people who I was. And as you know, as we all know, coming out is actually never ending. So there's never a point when you're not telling people. It gets slightly easier. I've got more confidence now than I had certainly when I was in my 20s, for example. There are still some audiences where I feel slightly diffident about saying, but generally I found it a really positive experience. So I think one of my two starting points is seeing whether there are other people around who need that kind of support. So it's just talking to people. The second bit follows on exactly from what Amie's just said. It's about learning. So it's about there are also, all of us have all sorts of things we don't know anything about. It's about finding out as quickly as we can and as best we can all those things that we're missing. And then it's about using that knowledge. And yes, we're going to make mistakes. So going back to the same thing about pronouns, there may be issues where there may be moments when we make a mistake, but provided we know we have and we deal with that and we deal with it properly, I think that's fine. I'll give you just a silly example. Well, it's not silly, but it's kind of it. So Boots, the chemist locally, has got a very bright young man who's their new sort of pharmacy assistant. And he's obviously, somebody's told him that the way to deal with a queue is to keep saying, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, madam." And it's so painful because you see all these people looking at him. And I wish somebody would actually tell him that, we don't all go by sir or madam. And it's something around, you may have been told at some point in the past that that's a good way to greet people, but we need to unlearn that behavior and learn something different. And it's about that learning and unlearning that I'd make my starting point. Sorry, it's rather a long answer.
No, that's really interesting. And I think about the talking, and also it like talking naturally, normally about, about your identity as well as what you enjoy doing, in your personal life. It's not just about that's the only thing you talk about, but it's also, talking about, I do that with my church. I say, oh, I did this at the weekend at church. I make it normal, the same as I would talk about my gardening. I don't, it's like, and then people are more likely to chat to you about it if it's as part of your whole package, the whole package that is Amie, the whole package that is John. So then people are more likely to ask questions, which I think is really interesting. And just being, I think, naturally inquisitive. If you don't know something, ask and say, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to say, but I'd like to know about this. Can we have a conversation? I think that's really important about being open about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just about being open and honest, I think, and just be brave, to do try and call people the right name. And as people say in the chat, not everyone says, they're not all, ladies, for example. Some people like to be non-binary, gender neutral, and it's just sort of being open to other identities, and all are valid. I think it's just important that we do think about that and just bear it in mind. Just take a bit more care with what we say and what we do.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I grew up in, so I won't say it again. I grew up a long time ago, and views were really different. And I grew up in a family where my dad was homophobic and racist. And so I was brought up in a particular setting, which I had started to unlearn when I was about 14, and unlearned very quickly. But it's about recognizing that we may be different, and we have things that we've been told, things we've learned, things we've always done that we now need to start unlearning and undoing and stop doing, because it's not right in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Leanne's asked a question in the chat. I don't know, Leanne, if you want to ask the question yourself. You might be busy live tweeting.
Yeah, I'm typing back. I'm back into it. I was just thinking, you know, like Amie, because obviously, like you are like a solo librarian. But I was wondering, like, do you have a network that you of like other school librarians or other sort of professionals that you've been able to kind of share ideas with about this, or where have you gotten inspiration from, or maybe you don't have that, but I was just wondering, because I have found, I was just thinking, one of the things I was just typing is how useful I found the different networks at Sunderland about where I work, about the loads of training, loads of, you know, everything, and it's like an exemplary place in terms of that. I was thinking, do you have access to that? Do you know what I mean? That's my question.
Yeah, no. I think I don't really have a network as such. I think because I started working here in the pandemic, it's been a bit isolating, pardon the pun. But I know there are two brilliant librarians over in Howell School, which is just across the way. My school is an independent school, so it is a paid day school. So I'm very lucky with the resources that I have. Other schools perhaps don't have the same resources or the same budget. And it's so important that I remember that. You know, I remember how fortunate I am to be able to stock this library with such amazing resources and make it what it is because I'm able to. So I don't really have a network as such. I have sort of spoken to other librarians when school librarians when I started, because it was my first school. I've worked in libraries since I was 21 when I came out of university, but this has been my first school. So a lot of it has just been sort of taking what I know and learning on the job, like we said earlier, and generally just having conversations with either colleagues or friends I know who are part of the LGBTQ+ community and the students here. And it's very much been a sort of learning experience all around, sort of learning from people and then putting it in place. But I would love to speak to other librarians and see if they've had any sort of similar experiences, what challenges they've faced. And obviously it's been great to sort of find out about the LGBTQ+ network with CILIP, and John has obviously been amazing with supporting me with getting to this point to present tonight. So I would be more than open to talking to others, but I haven't got a sort of set network as such. It's just at its heart, it's come from something that I'm really passionate about. And even though I'm not really part of the community, I'm heterosexual, but I'm panromantic, and I just ally myself with it as much as possible. It's been something that I really feel passionate about and have done for a very long time. I just want people to feel safe and represented and respected in a place where you come to escape, essentially.
I think there is no better way to end today's webinar. I can't even see it better, Amie. I think that is just, I kind of want to quote what you've just said, and I shall have to go back and relook at the recording when I'm downloading it later. Thank you so much, John and Amie. Both what you've both said, I think you've complemented each other really well. I think the questions, there's also some suggestions that are coming in the chat, Amie, about networks fantastic. You can link into, which is brilliant. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. We always appreciate kind of feedback about our events, and Jenny has just posted a link to a really small feedback form. What did you like? What did you not like? What else would you like us to put on? The reason I'm saying that is each year we have an annual planning meeting in our North East group to plan like for the next year, and we're actually having that next week. So if there's something you would like to see us put on in the next year, there is a little space on that evaluation form for you to let us know. And I will keep an eye out when we're getting those things through. So you never know, by being part of tonight's webinar, you might actually help influence the events we put on next year, which would be amazing. So if you get that in the next few days, you never know, you might end up featuring. If you want to come and speak at one of our future events and you want to volunteer your services, by all means, put that on there. Little did John know a few years ago when he came to speak as part of an event where there were several speakers, people were like, oh, we want to know more about this gentleman. Can he come back? Or not gentleman, depending how, John, you wish to be referred to. And we've had him back several times now because there's lots of different aspects. So do let us know what you are thinking, what you've liked about today, what else you'd like us to do. If you've been really inspired and want to share with other people, we're always interested at each of our events for someone to write up a little entry on our blog. And so if you're interested in doing that, you can contact me I will be sending out the recording and the slides, so that will come direct from me, so you can just email me back if you'd like to do that. If any of you are doing professional registration at the moment with CILIP, it could be a piece of evidence. And if you're not working, well, actually, because this is a multi-sectoral event, whatever sector you're working in, that could go in criteria 3. You can tell I'm speaking with my CILIP mentor hat on here. Or you just want to share what you've learned this evening, and you want to share some of John and Amie's passion. Because I think that passion is the word that I will come away with from today. And I would love to come, and I just want to pick off your books off your shelf, Amie. They want to slightly coloured, I want to go read them all.
Honestly, come to Cardiff and come and have a look. It's just great.
Excellent. So thank you once again, John and Amie. It's been brilliant for you to come. The fact that we've been able to gather from all corners of the country, well, 2 countries today, has just been brilliant. So as we're at 7 o'clock, we will finish here, but I will just stay online in case anyone's got any final questions. Thank you very much. We even have some Welsh in the chat as well. I'm afraid I'm not sure what that Welsh is, but maybe someone else will be able to answer that.
Thank you very much, that means.
Oh, that's brilliant. So we can all learn something new if you don't already know Welsh. So thank you very much for everyone that's come, everyone that's commented, and for John and Amie. We've really appreciated having you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you again.
You're very welcome.